All right, we're about to tackle one of the biggest questions there is. On the surface, it sounds so simple, but trust me, it quickly spirals down a rabbit hole of sociology, philosophy, and even brain science. It's a question you've definitely asked yourself before, but maybe never really answered.
No, really, just take a second and think about it. Who are you?
I'm willing to bet you came up with a list of roles, right? You're a parent, an employee, a friend, a student, and that makes perfect sense. These labels are useful, they're our place in the world. They tell us how to act and who we are in relation to everybody else. But that's where things get interesting. Because today, we're going to challenge that core feeling of a single, stable you. We're going to peel back all those layers and see what's actually underneath. And the answer might surprise you. So first up, let's start with the most familiar idea, the self that society helps us build. This is the you that exists in the eyes of other people. So a sociologist named Charles Cooley came up with this brilliant concept called the looking glass self. He said our identity isn't some private thing we figure out on our own. Nope, it's a reflection. We see ourselves through the eyes of others. We imagine how they're judging us, and then we build our identity based on that perception. It's like we're living inside a giant social mirror. And this idea gets even more interesting. Another sociologist, Erving Goffman, took it a step further with his theory of dramaturgy. For Goffman, social life isn't just a mirror. It's a huge theatrical performance. We aren't just reflecting, we are actively performing a character that we call me. Goffman breaks this down into two stages. The front stage is our public performance. Think about how you act in a job interview, right? You're polished, you're professional. The backstage is where we drop the act. Like the second you get back to your car after that interview, you can finally relax. We're all constantly shifting between these two, managing the impression we give off. And get this, we aren't born knowing how to do any of this. Sociologist George Herbert Mead actually mapped out how we learn it. As little kids, we start by just imitating people. Then we learn to play a single role, like playing mom. Eventually, we start to grasp complex social games, like a team sport where you have to understand multiple roles at once. And finally, we internalize the rules of the game itself, what Mead called the generalized other. Only then, he said, does a true self really emerge. So all of this leads to a pretty deep question. If our identity is just a reflection, if it's a performance that we learn to perfect, then who is the actor behind the mask? Is there a real you under it all?
And that question takes us out of sociology and straight into a much more radical idea, one you can find in both ancient philosophy and modern spirituality, the idea that the self is an illusion.
Let's look at two powerful but totally opposing ideas from Eastern traditions. In Hinduism, you have the concept of Atman. This is the belief in a permanent, unchanging, essential soul, the eternal you. But then you look at Buddhism, and you find the doctrine of anatta, which means no self. This view argues there is no permanent underlying substance that is you. It just isn't there. This idea of no self really echoes in the modern spiritual concept of ego death. This is often described as a sudden, profound realization that the entire sense of I you've built up your whole life is just a mental construction, a fabrication. It's a feeling like the walls of separation just come crumbling down.
And this isn't just an Eastern idea. Centuries ago, the Scottish philosopher David Hume came to the exact same conclusion. He argued that when you try to look inside for a stable self, you can't find one. All you find is a bundle of perceptions, thoughts, and feelings, all in constant motion. There's no container, only the contents. Okay, so if the self is a social performance and a philosophical illusion, what does modern science have to say? What happens when we look for the self inside the brain? Well, cognitive science largely backs up this skeptical view. The traditional idea of a central self acting like a CEO, making all the decisions from the top down, it just doesn't seem to hold up. There's no real evidence of a little person in your head that's in charge. So what is it then? One powerful idea from the philosopher Daniel Dennett is that the self is just one specialized system among many. He calls it the brain's public relations department. Its job isn't to cause our actions, but to explain them after the fact, creating a neat story for everyone else to hear. This model from a psychology study really shows what's going on. At the bottom, you have explicit attitudes. That's what you consciously think. Up top, implicit attitudes, your unconscious biases. Just look at the arrows. Everything is influencing everything else. There is no top-down command. The conscious self isn't the boss. It's just a partner in a very, very complex dance. Now, an alternative view from cognitive science
is that the self isn't a single part at all, not even a PR department. Instead, the self is simply the name we give to the entire integrated system, the whole collection of all our brain's mechanisms working together as one.
Okay, wow, a social construct, an illusion, a PR agent. This is getting pretty abstract. So, what does any of this mean for our actual lives? What's the practical problem here? And let's be honest, this all sounds a little crazy, doesn't it? A Reddit commenter put it perfectly. The idea of no self feels intuitively wrong because when something happens to you, the pain is very real and it feels like it's yours and yours alone.
And the stakes here are incredibly high. Our entire social world is built on the idea of a stable individual self. Without it, everything from property and responsibility to status and legacy starts to completely unravel. I mean, who do you blame if there's no stable who? So let's be really clear. The argument isn't that you don't exist. Of course you do. The real idea, the big takeaway, is that the feeling of a single, unified I at the very center of your experience, well, it might just be a powerful, useful, and very convincing story that we tell ourselves. And that leaves us with one final question to ponder, a question that brings together sociology, philosophy, and cognitive science. If your self is a story, who or what is writing it?